Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 261, Art of Programming with Jo-Michael Scheibe. The name Jo-Michael Scheibe has been known to many in the world of choral music for decades. The Jo-Michael Scheibe Choral Series is one of the richest and most thorough curations of the art form available. Choosing repertoire can often be a needle in a haystack type of process, but Dr. Scheibe has it down to a science. His series began in the 1990s, and many of us in the profession, including myself, may have known his name from the little signature on the front of his cover, or we knew how great his work was with his choirs. In this episode, he will set the premise bluntly. Number one, I think I look at my choir, he says. I need to know what my choir is composed of so that I don't frustrate them. If I don't have low Cs, Rachmaninoff is not going to work. From there, we get practical about process. We dig into musical literacy and how singing more repertoire than we need sometimes can improve the fluency of their reading, and materials that actually fit the ensemble can be discovered that way. Finally, we talk about pacing and philosophy, why sometimes themes can be good, but also can be limiting, and how tricky it can be to create a philosophical hierarchy of programming that balances the needs of our singers with other needs like diversity in terms of time, culture, sound on the program, etc., as well as the ever-present need to please our colleagues with our repertoire choices. So tune in and have your thinking stimulated and maybe challenged. And then don't forget to head over to the Choralosopher's Facebook page to weigh in yourself on your programming ideas and philosophy. There'll be a post there about this episode. You can drop your opinions or just start a conversation about programming there. We'd love to hear from you. Your music program or event deserves a platform that does it all, without the extra costs. With Ludus, you get seamless ticketing, built-in marketing, powerful fundraising, and volunteer management, where volunteers can sign up, schedule shifts, and track hours with ease. Need to sell merchandise and concessions in person? Ludus Retail lets you log sales by each group, track inventory, keep everything organized. Hosting music lessons or theater camps? They have a classes feature, which makes registration and student tracking effortless. And it's free for your organization. Thousands of programs already trust Ludus because they help you focus on what matters most, the performance. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more, including auto-assessment for at-home assignments, no more grading them individually. They can be graded in the moment. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. I'm not sure how much, if anything, out there has not gone up in price since 2020, but I know one thing that hasn't, and that is the membership to the Patreon and to the Substack to support this show. The people who are signed up over there as paid subscribers, as my thank you to them, they can get things like t-shirts from the choralosophy.com shop. They can also get access to my Google folder of teaching materials that I've talked about on the show for over the years. And of course, they just want to help make sure that this show can continue. And one of those benefits is a shout out on the show. Shout outs for the Inner Circle and producer tiers over on Patreon. We have Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Rebecca Chalk, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. Okay, Mike Scheibe.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
To my home studio and to my house. Of course, you are local in Kansas City now, and
Yep.
This is exciting to get to talk face to face.
It's been great. It's been a good move.
Good.
A great move.
Now, I know the background of why you're here, but why don't you share with people why you moved from California a few years back to this area?
Well, we moved because of my daughter who lives in Lake Lotawana, and so we wanted to they asked us if we would move, and we came and bought a house and told them we bought a house, and then they gave us a gift that was a sonogram with my daughter was pregnant, and it was a real surprise. So we have a little granddaughter who's about 14, 15 months now, just walking and talking and just storming around. And then we have a 9-year-old granddaughter as well. So it's been kind of a great thing to do. And so we're really happy to be here. And we're kind of when both parents are working or traveling, we're the people that take care of at least the 15-month-old. So yeah, it's been great.
that is such a blessing when families can do that, because that we had that when our kids were small too, or with grandparents nearby, and it was a game changer for us as young parents. But then also just the keeping the family unit close is also so valuable. You can't buy that.
Well, and for us, both Mary and I, we traveled so much from across the country. We grew up in sort of in California, and then we went to Arizona, and then finally to Miami, and then came back to USC. So the kids never had grandparents close by.
Right.
And so this, to us, was really important to do that for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you share a little bit about your background for the person listening who might not know? I think a lot of people will know kind of some of the things you've done in your career, but why don't you give us the truncated version?
My parents were immigrants. They came to this country. I was born a couple weeks later in Southern California. Had language difficulties because my parents were German, didn't speak English. Went to a parochial school through 8th grade, and then went to a large public high school in Orange County. And then went to Cal State Long Beach, and at that time Frank Pooler was there, and Frank Pooler was doing a lot of contemporary music. He was very involved in the music of Scandinavia in particular. Okay. So Nystedt and Choland and Berglund and all of those people were they were there. And Frank had a lot of interests. And this period of time was really good because we saw everything in manuscripts. And then did a master's at Cal State Long Beach, taught high school for a year in Napa Valley, taught for 4 years in Huntington Beach, at Huntington Beach High, and then went to teach at Long Beach City College because of the kindness of Paul Solomonovich.
Wow.
And he opened the door, and I ended up there for 7 years, and then finished a doctorate while I was doing that. Went to USC, met Rod in that period of time, and that was a major influence as well. So all of those things kind of happened. I only wanted to be a high school choral director. That's all I wanted to do. Yeah. I wanted to be like my high school choral director, hopefully better at times, but so it was a great path.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Now, one thing I'm curious about just from your story there is actually back to your early childhood. You mentioned having parents that spoke German,
right,
which gave you some language trouble when you went to school in the U.S.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time related to, so for example, how long did that trouble last in your life? And were there other just general culture shock things that stand out to you about that time of being here at that time?
Well, my parents, because they didn't know anything about American traditions and things like that, it took until my youngest brother decided he wanted to play football before we could get involved in sports. I had problems in especially kindergarten, first grade. In the second grade, my parents moved me to the parochial school because the language was so different, and we didn't speak English at home. We only spoke German at home. And even when I was in high school, my brothers and I, we were all going to a German school on Saturdays that we did for 8 hours, located in Los Angeles, so that we keep the language going. So there was that. I think it was good that I went to a parochial school because it was a Lutheran parochial school, and a large church program. I sang in the choir with the children's choir. The organist was my 5th grade teacher. He'd let me sit and turn pages for him, and I was just learning all the skills. So I think that was a really important part of that growth cycle. The high school was, we were about 2,300 members in the high school, and I would say probably 800 of us sang, and probably another 150 or 200 were in the band. And like you said earlier about, at that time, you had 3 options. You could take theater, you could take music, well, I guess you could take art, and then you could take, you could do band, choir, something like that. And I got some opportunities there, and I just had, I think it just really turned a switch on for me. I loved singing hymns. I loved being involved in that. Not all the other guys did, but
Right.
it was something that I loved to do.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
That's great. Yeah. So, of course, our main meat of our conversation today is going to be centered around programming,
yeah.
finding repertoire, programming for your choir, finding the piece of music that not only expands your own horizons, but your singer's horizons, etc. Now, the first question I have about that for you is, of course, the Jo-Michael Scheibe Choral Series
Yeah.
is really well known. How many years have you been doing that?
It started when I went to University of Miami, and I had a call from somebody I'd met from a summer workshop I was a student at Cal State Long Beach with Frank Pooler, and the summer workshop had Norman Luboff, Frank Pooler, Ava Mae Struckmeyer, who was a big name in middle school work, Paul Solomonovich, and Eric Erickson's first trip. So I got there, I helped out, I was in between my getting teaching certification. And so I helped out that summer. And then I moved to Miami, and I got a call from this guy who had a company called Plymouth Music.
Okay.
And a major distributor of music. It had Walton, it had just all of these Cola Voce came out of that company. And so I became very involved there. He called and said, "Can you come and look at some scores?" And I'm thinking, oh.
And what year are we talking about, right?
1993.
93. Okay.
Okay, so I went in and I picked up some, what I thought was going to be a small box, and it was really 2 boxes under a desk with probably 300 or 400 scores. And I just said, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But in that, through that experience, I came back with pieces that I said, I think these would do well. In 1993, paper was cheap.
Yeah.
So you would publish everything, and anything that stuck to the walls, you'd reprint.
Okay.
Everything else you'd throw away in the trash because you didn't want to pay the taxes on it.
Sure.
So
Okay.
Bernie had come from New York. He was a good guy. He said to me at one point, he said, "Well, you've done all this work. Would you like to have a series?" And I said, "What's a series?" And he said, "Well, you have this piece and you've done all this editing, and why don't we put it in your series?" And I said, "I have no idea. Walter Arrett and these people had series. So anyways, it ended up that I had a series with him. And that was with Plymouth, which became Cola Voce, and with Walton, which is still part of the catalog. And then years later, when I moved back to California, I talked with Barbara Harlow and Santa Barbara and talked to her. And she said, yep. So just kind of, happened. It wasn't planned. First piece I edited was this piece that was terribly difficult and nobody wanted to do it, and that was Water Night by Eric Whitacre.
Okay, yeah.
And so that, and then he said, do you have anything you want to publish? And I said, well, I have this other piece called Cloudburst. And he looked at the score. He didn't read music. He had no idea. And I said, I think we really need to get this published. And I think in the Missouri All-State, I did that back in the 1990s with the All-State Choir. So it grew out of just trying to help somebody out. It wasn't a financial thing at all. It was just, and now I have, Stacy Gibbs will call and say, hey, what do you think about this piece? And what if we do this? And I have a commission by here. And I have harder pieces. So pieces that, you're not going to publish, a lot of copies. So I have a few pieces that I've taken to Music Spoke that are larger works that are timed or very difficult or all a cappella and very divisied or big solos. And then I also have now with Hal Leonard, I'm doing anytime there's a copywritten tune that I get asked, can I help? Then I just contact them, and then there's a selected by category. So David Van Kampen and Daniel Brimsmead, and there's this group of people that I help get these pieces published.
Okay. So that's actually way more complicated than I thought it actually was. Because I just assumed that at this point it was just that your choral series was just like a Walton thing, or it really can go to wherever publisher will have it.
Yeah. Alliance also has part of my series too.
Okay.
The
is there
reason
one,
for that,
sorry to interrupt, I'm just going to throw this question in there too, because I think it's related. So is there one centralized place where your entire choral series can be found, or do people have to bop around to all these
They have to bop around.
Okay.
So, for instance, Santa Barbara is primarily educational music, so it'll be things that are usable for schools. It can have some SAB things. It's stuff I'm not going to do, but I help people get that music published. So I have I think I have a spreadsheet where I keep everything that I have, and I mark when it's been submitted to a publisher, and then I follow up, and I keep just on top of that. Some pieces take 2 or 3 years to get published, just because of license and copyright issues. Other pieces, you need a good recording, and if you don't have a recording, most of these publishers don't want to have a studio choir do these recordings. And I don't think most of us want to hear a studio recording of something that we're going to use with our high school for the most part. So Walton has a significant part of the catalog. Eric Whitaker, along with a lot of Korean music, which I'm working in now, so that we can get international music out. Because when I try to get music internationally, if it's in a publishing house somewhere in Ireland, for instance, it takes forever to get it. Or if it's if it's Music Baltica, it costs a fortune, or Peters or something like that. So I try to help distribute that music, get that music out. Most of my pieces that are currently from Korea are easier language pieces, but they are various grade levels. In other words, there's some that work really well for high school. There are some that, they really need to be a collegiate or a professional choir. So I have Ho Wan Woo, I have Hae Young Cho, I have all of these composers that are sending me things. And so I'm trying to get that music out. And these are people that, the choral scene in Korea is just phenomenal, because you have 60 city choirs. And these are full-time jobs for these people. So, they're turning out all this music, and we didn't have a way of getting it. And so with the Korean Choral Composers Association, I work with them and try and get some of the music out here.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's an interesting thing, because your series now has had such longevity and breadth that I knew who Jo-Michael Scheibe was from the series first, from seeing your name, like in the 90s, even as I was a college student.
Right.
I didn't know, I'd never heard one of your choirs, but I had seen your name on one of those. Of course, then the internet changed that a few years later, and I could start to hear recordings of your choir from wherever I might have been at the time. And so what has that been like, just kind of having your stamp of approval on all these pieces, and like how does that exist in your head to make sense of all that?
All I'm trying to do is, one, help the composer get their music out there.
Are you a director new to the profession, or are you a seasoned director who is in a new place? One of my favorite tips for generating interest in the program and to instill buy-in is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can go to Orlando, you can go to Ireland, or you can perform in a parade or a theme park. You can even take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York. Wherever you end up, not only will your current crew look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com.
I watched Frank Pooler do that. I watched Rod Eichenberger premiere the Midwinter songs and the Fire songs of Morten Lauritsen. So my world has been in this compositional world. And USC had this wonderful composition program going on with Don Crockett. And, you've got Ted Hearn there. And so there's all of this music that you can get to, and you can work with a composer in person. Having Morten Lauritsen come in and work with your choir and say, no, I wanted this tempo, or I want this done, and can you do this, and all of that. That's a great growth for not only me, but for my students, because the care and the concern that he has for his music. So all of that, I think I I'm dedicated to making sure that it gets into the right catalog. And if it isn't in the right catalog in my series, I will send it to ECS, or I'll send it, to somebody else that I think it fits better than with my series. If it's a high church piece, most likely I'm not going to have a place to really put that. So many of the series that I have, and I don't even remember how many series I have total, but I would say all of them have a different foci.
Okay.
So they will all have a different place to go. And it helps because, I'll give you an example. Sometimes the publisher will reject it because they don't think they're going to have the sales, especially with Korean music. The next thing we know, that piece has sold 5,000 copies in some Pepper's Choice, Editor's Choice, and it's just going into, and yet this publisher didn't want it, and here it is there, and I believed in it. So it's kind of, there's music that I don't believe in. I will say, hey, you might want to work this out a little better. This all of a sudden we're changing keys. Might want to, and I get a lot of students that are in the process, and I want to support that.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to some of the publishing stuff
Sure.
here and again in a minute, but I want to go back, I guess, to another layer.
Yeah.
Which is just you as a choir leader.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about repertoire for a choir that you're in charge of, whether it be university or when you were a high school teacher or any of those
Sure.
things, do you have? And I'm sure with all the repertoire you've looked at, you've thought this through, but there is a philosophy that underlines how you choose your music. And what could you tell us about that?
Well, number one, I think I look at my choir. I need to know what my choir is composed of so that I don't frustrate them. If I don't have low C's this year at the USC Chamber Singers, putting in some Rachmaninoff with those low C's or D's, not going to work.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think I know my singers well. I also know that I'm going to choose much more music than we will do. I don't believe in just, here are our 4 pieces for concert 1, here's our 4 pieces for concert 2, and here's the competition music. I've always felt that sight reading gets better if we read the music. So with chamber singers, it was easy. They could read anything. The chorale at both at NAU and at Miami could do that very well. So sight reading was never a real issue with those choirs. But I need to look at tessitura. I need to look at the text. I have pieces that I build programs around. So I always believe that golden mean is a great thing to look at and to put a piece right there, and how do I build a program around that? And sometimes it's thematic, but oftentimes it's not. I kind of don't like to have a theme because then it limits me with what I can do. I also know what I've got going in the year, so I can go and say, okay, we're singing LA Chamber Orchestra, we're doing Bach here, we're doing Mozart here, we're doing this here. I want to have a broad base of things that those students, when they walk out, have, that they know these are the pieces that we sang this year, so that I'm not eliminating any particular focus. The music that the chamber singers did, because they were able to read so well and were smart singers, they wanted things that challenged them. So Ted Hearn, Privilege, those things, really great pieces. Morton Lauritsen, tough stuff. It looks easy. It's kind of, you think it's going to be there. Eric Whitacre, whatever that is, Brahms, Britten. I try to make sure that they've got, at some point, they've had something in that. And sometimes we're, involved with the opera chorus or something like that too. So,
sure.
You try to build a broad base. As a high school teacher, I always knew kind of where my kids would be. It was harder at the community college. The community college was the hardest teaching I probably had. And while I had some success there, I still remember we sang at an ACDA convention in Salt Lake City. And the soprano section I had chosen at the beginning of the year, out of that there were 8 singers, and there were 6 of them that were brand new as we entered the semester. So I'm Okay, hey, we worked on, the 3 Shakespeare songs by Ralph Vaughan Williams. We had that all done. Now we're taking the sopranos out and we have to start all over again. There's no perfect place unless you're working with the LA Master Chorale or San Francisco Symphony.
Disneyland, literally.
Yeah, really, yeah.
So just about the community college, I'm just curious, was it the almost itinerant nature of the student population, like the constant turnover? Was that why it was so hard?
I think, this was between 1978 and 1985. And so we had some bad periods of time with finances. The government was not doing well. Kids would get a job offer to go work this noon shift, and they were in my choir, and that job offer gave them 50 cents more an hour, and that meant the world at that point. So it was partially that. I think part of it as well was we were, this is after Vietnam, so you have all of the movement of immigrants into the Orange County, LA area from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, just this whole group of people. So now how do I reach them when they sit on a Friday afternoon and they sing their folk songs with a guitar in unison? So how do I, involve them?
Or how do you hit a moving target, it sounds like?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And so, all those things are very, I would say, would align with my philosophy if I'm thinking about a piece of music or music for my choir, especially like what you said about I'd rather have them have too much music in their folder than not enough. That's how I would say it sometimes. In fact, just the other day I had a conversation with one of my students. There's a piece that we have in their folder. We've sung it a few times, but we haven't sung it in a while. And she came up to me and said, well, why haven't we sung this piece? And I said, well, I don't think we're going to do it at the concert next week. We have a concert in, about 10 days. And we're just, we're not going to get to it.
Right.
But she said, well, then why do we have it in our folder? And I said, well, because I've never taught this choir before. I've taught other choirs, but I cannot. We are brand new to each other, so I don't know how much music we need. I'd rather you have too much and not enough. And but we're not going to throw together a hastily prepared piece just to have a third one, or whatever.
Right.
We're going to do the best things we have on that concert.
Well, you want them to come out with success.
Right.
You want them to feel that they have succeeded in challenging themselves with this music. They know they're not stupid. I keep reminding people that high school students or college kids, they know when you're not singing in tune. They know when the phrasing's not right. They know when we're missing notes. All of that is there, and you always have some student in there that is absolutely so bright, and they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, we're missing the E flat and the tenor on this part, and can we go over it? And so I like that symbiotic type of relationship in the rehearsal. It gets kind of cumbersome at times, but I figured a way to deal with that, which is I have on their stand, they have a piece of paper, at least they did. Now they do it on a Google form, and they write the problem, their section, the page number, the measure number, what the problem is. And then I look at it and I say, hey, Chris told me that we're missing this note here. Let's see if we can take care of this problem, tenors. And what have you done? You've engaged that student to be part of this symbiotic relationship between conductor and singers.
Yeah, that's time saver too.
Yeah.
To not have to have that conversation about everybody's pet problem.
Where are we releasing?
Yeah.
Do you want the T on the beat or off the beat? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that idea. I definitely will be stealing that. So that's an interesting thing to me too, because just of course we can talk as conductors and as teachers about the selection of the repertoire, but the impact it has on the students or the singers in the choir, whether they're students or not, adults or whoever, they're part of the equation as well. As you said at the very beginning, we're considering the choir first. And I think about things like, let's say it's that piece that was the extra piece in the folder. It's the one we never quite performed. One could look at it one way and say, well, that was just a waste of their time then, because they didn't get to sing it. And by the way, you also, by taking that one piece away, then now they don't have a piece from this culture, and they don't have a piece in this language anymore, and now there's not one that's piano accompanied anymore. And so we have all these boxes we're trying to check, and I'm all for attempting to check the boxes. but not at the expense of the student education experience or the singer experience.
I would agree with that. I try to check off boxes, but it doesn't mean that the pieces that I've checked off on the box because they meet that are going to be used. I'm not going to do that to my students. My students are too smart. The text has to make sense. And we've all seen this. They are, some of my students are composers. They're writing great music. Dale Trombore was one of my students.
Oh, okay, great.
So, Estandra Choi. I mean, I have all these students, and we're doing their music at times. We will do their music, but sometimes their music is really tough, and it has to take time. Right. And I also think that it's not a bad idea if you have a piece that you didn't quite get to, or maybe you started it and it wasn't quite the right thing, then I bring it back the next year and come back to it. But I also look at from the standpoint of what is the audience going to hear? Is there enough color changes? Is everything in minor or major, or is it all upbeat? I look at all of that when I'm planning this. And I also look at the voice. I think sometimes we don't think about the voice and what that voice can do. And when you're dealing with a choir that's going to do an hour-long concert or an hour and 10 minutes of music, that's a lot of wear and tear on that little membrane.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There was a time once when I think deep down, my wife Beth, who is a high soprano, is still angry at me for a concert I programmed in Contorai about 8 or 9 years ago, where she's really good, especially when we were younger. Is very good at the high straight tone stuff.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about her ability to do that, and I just put way too much of that in one concert. So she's up above the staff, and at a certain point in the concert, her voice just gave out.
Right.
And she was so mad and so embarrassed, and of course, you can't ask, I love to do that, but I can't do it for an hour straight.
Exactly.
You have to consider, and it's been done to me too as a singer.
Sure.
There was years when I was in the Kansas City Chorale, and we were singing all the Russian stuff that Charles likes to do.
Yeah.
And I had been placed as kind of like the lowest tenor in the choir. Of course, in that Russian music, oftentimes the middle men's part is the bottom of the bass clef.
Right, yeah.
Which I can sing those notes, but not for an hour and a half.
And you can't be heard for an hour and a half.
Right,
It just doesn't, you don't have that.
Yeah,
so.
I was trashed. My vocally just trashed. It's great repertoire, and it was fun to do, but it was like, can't, so those things are important too.
Well, and you have to, when you have a choir that meets twice a week for an hour and 40 minutes, you have to really think about every rehearsal minute. And am I going to be able to get all this stuff done? So I need something that is easier, that lets Charles Hurt was really great at this. He would put Romberg and then throw in a Polywalla doodle thing by anyways. He would do that. He would take something like by Mio and then he'd put James Erb on the other side of it.
Right.
So just so that the ears were always getting there. And if you gave them something where they had to work too hard all the time, he felt that the audience and the singers wouldn't be able to keep the attention going the way they wanted to. So,
well, audience accessibility is also a part of that. I think
absolutely. Yeah.
The audience accessibility meaning, like, does the audience member have the education necessary to even understand what it is that they're listening to? And yes, should we stretch their imaginations? Should we push the audience as well? Yes, absolutely. But just like the high notes for Beth and the low notes for me, and there's only so much you can take, and so that's all part of it, I think.
And I think you always have to think about the flow in the voice as well. So if I'm up here, it's going to take some time to get back down here, vocally, because the membrane is thin. It thins out, and now you don't have them, and now you need this low C in the soprano line. And so I think it's terribly important that we look at what are we asking our singers to do? Is it possible with these singers? Much easier to do it with college singers than it is with high school singers than it is with middle school singers. But we're always looking for different rep.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So another kind of area here too that's interesting to me is that if we're thinking about like the resources that are available to those of us who are directing choirs now versus say when the series started in 93, but also versus when your career started, the process for choosing repertoire is vastly different. Even in my, my college, I started as a music education major in 1998, and I couldn't go online. I mean, to find music, the internet had just been born, but there wasn't like a search engine for choral music, to find that kind of stuff. So that meant for me a lot of trips to the library. It meant checking out CDs or even older records and trying to find stuff that way. And of course, something similar prior to that. But how would you describe your process now versus certain things early that you remember in your career about finding repertoire?
I would go up to San Francisco, and there was a great music store there, and there was one in Los Angeles as well. And I would go and I'd just go through the piles. I mean, I would sit there and sit and look at the scores and say, okay, I want to look at this more. Let me get a copy of this. I have in my home, I have, I don't know, huge file drawers that I have with my scores. I have a box that says, before I die, I want to do these pieces. I mean, it's that type of repertoire that I've kept.
A bucket list.
A bucket list of pieces I want to do. But Eric Erickson was out for his first time in the United States. I didn't know him. Frank played a tape of his choir at the time, and then we got an LP. I bought the LP. It was the 5 Centuries of Choral Music, and it had, Poulenc, and it had Debussy, and it had Ravel, and it had Brahms, and it had all of this great repertoire that I hadn't heard. And yes, I did go to the LA Phil. I went to the concerts. I saw that, but there is nothing like searching, and I think that's where sometimes the younger person that goes to the internet and doesn't see the score and buys it for their choir, I think that's could be very dangerous, because maybe you don't know what those ranges are. Maybe they aren't on a screen that you can see. But Walton and a lot of these companies now even have scrolling scores that you can look at and see the ranges. One page always gone, for public, so that you don't buy this, that you don't print the score out. But we also didn't have digital printing. I mean, you think about it, if I find a piece that I've been looking for this piece, I can usually get it digitally today. And I can have it today at the end of rehearsal. I can have it in my hands. That's a whole different animal. I went to lots of concerts. I went to every ACDA convention, every festival I could go to. Took my choirs there, learned new literature, talked to my colleagues. My colleagues are phenomenal people that have such a wealth of information. And my colleagues, meaning people from Rob Eistedt to Jonathan Talberg to William Hall when he was around. All of these people, or Vance George, with the San Francisco. They share. You ask questions. Weston Noble was great at that. He'd say, where'd you find that piece? I said, well, I found it. And I said, where'd you find that piece? And we share that art. I think that's an important part of who we are and what we're trying to do. We want our art to continue. We want it to elevate what we're doing. To do that means you've got to share your resources, whether that's from a vocal standpoint or a phrasing standpoint or a diction standpoint or just picking the music.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I'm curious too, in that span of time, the process, of course, has changed, as you just described. Do you feel like the profession at large has also changed in terms of how it processes, how it chooses its repertoire? The priorities, have the priorities changed? How do you see that now versus 40 years ago?
40 years ago, you would have seen a program that's pretty standard. You'd have Bach, you'd have Brahms, you'd have Della Gioia, you'd have these wonderful pieces of music. Today, it seems like everything has been published in the last 10 years and is up there, or they're coming from another country where there's a history of music, a strong history of choral music. I think from my standpoint, I want to make sure that I am choosing that rep that hits those kids right in the center of where they are. And I think we've gone through this little wave. I don't think it's a wave. I mean, we have taken, while our government is moving in a different direction, our choral directors are moving in a different direction. I don't think we should dictate that you must have this and this and this and this. And Bill Denning, who was my predecessor at USC, he always said, I don't get it. Why are these people doing this music and why aren't they sticking with the standards? And I think we have to foster the new composition. We have to make sure that we're doing it, but not exclusively.
Right.
And not with eliminating some of the great music that's there for us and for our students.
Yeah.
So they learn Renaissance music. And it's not just, April is in my mistress' face or something like that.
Yeah, you could say that we've seen an increase of diversity along a lot of matrices in programming, but then a reduction of diversity related to time period.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is a paradox in a sort, because there's only the amount of time we have with our choirs is limited, so we can't only expand everything. You have you have to choose.
But you should choose so that you're thinking about that you're putting in your program literature that's going to elevate those students and their understanding of humanity and their understanding of the people we're around. So I have no problem doing contemporary music. I love doing contemporary music. I don't always perform my pieces that are in my series. There are pieces I have used. There are pieces that don't end up there because it's not appropriate for the groups I'm working with.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, when ACDA came out with rules for applications and stuff like that, that for me and for a number of us older folks in the ACDA that served, we found that kind of a little interesting because it changed the whole nature of what, if you didn't have those markers in your program, you couldn't get accepted.
Right. Yes. No, I hear what you're saying, and that frustrated me too. And I'm not even one of the old guard, I guess you could say, but because I don't want to do math while I'm doing a program. That stops being art to me.
Yeah.
And it stops because here's how I would think of it: the value that almost quota system that ACDA put out. I share the value.
Yeah.
But that's not how we should do it. We shouldn't do it by doing math. We should do it by putting the value forward and encouraging people. But one of the other things of this, and this is one of the curiosities that I had about your perspective, because starting your career pre-social media, pre-internet, I think part of this is also that programming today has become almost like we're not considering our choir first. We're considering whether our colleagues will approve of our program. And so it's almost like I see people programming for their colleagues' approval rather than for what is best for their choir.
And it's not to say, in a sense, that we can't deal with diverse repertoire at all. It's not saying that at all. It is basically saying we can't be exclusive to one or the other. We need to make sure we balance that repertoire, unless you are an identified group that this is your body of repertoire that you do, and this is your specialty.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
It's okay for groups to have specialties.
I agree. Yeah. I think, if you're going to be a symphonic choir, I don't expect you to go sing Palestrina, although they probably could do it very well. Bill Denning had such a strong feeling about the fact that we had moved back from making sure we had that great rep. You want to make sure you've got a chance to sing Bach. You want to be able to do, in the college level, I wanted to do a B minor. Having Rilling come in and do the B minor with the choir was one of the greatest things. And on the other side of that, we had Craig Hella Johnson come in, and we did Considering Matthew Shepard with Craig at the keyboard and a couple of his players from Austin there. And he conducted the chamber singers. We did the whole thing, staged it. That was as important as doing the B minor with Rilling. So it's that balance, I think, that we get lost in the balance.
Yeah. I feel like It's not. It is also a loss of balance, but it's also, I believe, a little bit of a hypocrisy. And what I mean by that is that culture. So if let's say one of the values we put forward is cultural diversity of our programming. Great, and we should. However, culture doesn't only vary by ethnicity. It doesn't only vary by geography. It doesn't only vary by language. It also varies by time.
Yeah.
Because, and I explain this to my students when we're exploring our repertoire and its cultures, various cultures. I explain to them that we're sitting here in Lee Summit, Missouri in 2025. If I were to drop you into a time machine in Lee Summit, Missouri in 1925, you would experience a culture that you do not recognize, and that you would not be able to operate well in. You would feel like a foreigner in another country very, very quickly because you wouldn't understand the culture. You wouldn't understand what kind of food to choose. You wouldn't understand the lingo that they're using. You would understand the basic language, but not much else, and you would feel very alienated. Culture changes over time also. And so if we're going to hold cultural diversity as a value, it should include time. And I agree. To me, that's a huge part of it, or else we're missing so much.
You know, my last year at USC, we did La Guerre and by Jonathan, and it was hard.
Yeah.
It was much harder than Les Chants des Oiseaux in my mind. And our students, they fought a little bit because of all the French and all of the characters. And I brought in our early music specialist, Adam Gilbert, and he and I, and then learning the old French, all of these things. That was in a very contemporary program, including Irish music, because we were going on tour to Ireland. And so we put that in a very specific spot in the program. And it was one of the hits of the program. Who would have thunk a piece in French that's 8 minutes long or 9 minutes long is going to do that? But they all got it. And I think for all of these students, singers, people, whether that's even in church, you know, it's all of that we need to make sure that we're balancing it. And giving the congregation, I remember I would always have to look at the congregation for services and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this, and what lectionary reading are we on, and how do I put this piece in there? And I found that was thrilling. I spent a lot of time during my summers doing all my prep work, or I did. That was critical for me. I just had to, because I had church choirs. I had 2 symphonic choirs. I had USC, when I was there, and at USC I had then all the dissertations and all that. So you start to think about time and how to use effort and time. So I'm a Hillis person that goes through and marks my scores. I go through and I circle changes of or modification of vowels because it doesn't work. Lots of times our composers don't think about, well, I want that E up there on that high A, and that's really not in the soprano repertoire or a range. So I try to make all of that, get that stuff done early. So.
Right. Yeah. All right, good. I've got another little just nerdy thing to get your opinion on before we kind of wrap this up, and I appreciate your time. So what is your take on choirs and the way that they're taught to sing as they approach different repertoire from different cultures, different times, different et cetera? Are you a big, let's change everything about the way we're singing for this style and for this style? Are you kind of a default, this is how my choir sings, and we're going to adjust as best we can, et cetera? How do you put yourself in that spectrum?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand is that the mouth, the lips, and the tongue are the colors of the voice.
Right.
And I don't want my choir to sing like they're 40 years old if they're 14.
Yep.
I want vocal health is paramount. I don't want to listen to a choir that doesn't sing in tune. So that's another paramount for me. I would say I will change colors with smart singers. I can say, I would like this to have a little more warmth to the tone. Can you put your hand on your chest, and can you speak into this, and can you make that come into the sound? So I'll do things like that, or I'll make sure that breath connection is there for the singers. I think oftentimes we push those singers too quick, too soon, and they're not ready for it. I would rather have them sing something beautiful, in tune, on the breath, musically, and not sound like they're singing Brahms in the Met chorus.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so almost like, let me see if I can put this in a different way, and you tell me if I've translated you wrong. So it's almost like you're saying that that the super high nuance changes of style would be a more advanced skill for a more advanced singer, that they would know their voice well enough to make those alterations of the mechanism in a healthy way to sing. But if you're working with, say, younger singers, let's say even beginners, they don't even know how to make their vocal folds touch together yet. Should we be asking them to sing 5 different ways when they don't even know how to sing one?
No.
Is that kind of...
Yeah, that's basically it. If we can't teach them to sing healthy, and they go and they do a concert and they come out shredded because they were trying to do everything their mentor or their hero in front of them decided to do, that's not going to work well. Stephen Smith has a book out, The Naked Voice, and I'm a proponent of that book, primarily because he talks about speech-based singing.
Yeah.
My wife taught at UM. She did all the musical theater voice teaching, or most of the musical theater voice teaching. And so all of that was much more forward. I don't want the tongue involved back here somewhere where the intonation's going to suffer, or where that tongue gets caught up and now they can't move around it and the air's not flowing. So I just want it healthy. And I sometimes see that we pound notes and we're pounding poor habits when we start teaching. My wife always said, I don't understand choral directors. They don't teach breathing. They don't talk about breathing. They don't do the basics. They need to have the basics. Well, when you're teaching college students and they all have their own voice teachers, you can't do that. But what you can do is you can get them to listen to themselves and to feel, how does that feel? If it's not feeling good, you might want to talk to your voice teacher about that and see what solutions there are for it.
Well, you can do that, but then you get the voice faculty mad at you, so...
I would say that most voice faculty they all want to have the best singer and have them at the Met.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at how many get to the Met or how many get even to Europe on an opera gig type thing, it's pretty small. The people in Los Angeles that sing in the master chorale or sang with me in the chamber singers, they make their money because they're studio singers. They go in and they can sight read anything. They say, yes, what would you like me to do? I can do that. They come prepared. They have no attitude. That's a perfect example of what we would want from our own singers.
Yeah.
Grant Gershon gets that through his kindness, the way he works with his choir. He's phenomenal.
Wow. And I would imagine if they're studio singers, they can sing in a bunch of different ways too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because that's what they wanted to do. You get a gig like they're doing, recording of Disney film or something like that. It has to be one style. You're going to do, Carmina Burana for a backtrack of something that's going up. It all changes. Or you're doing pop and jazz, and you got to do that healthy, and you can't be sick. Right. So you take care of the golden throat, so to speak. So. Yeah. Well,
Mike, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me. What would be your best advice for where a person could go to explore as much of your series as they felt like after hearing us have this conversation?
Well, I would suggest going to probably Walton and Santa Barbara at this point. Those are probably where the most of my pieces are. If you're a high school teacher, probably more towards Santa Barbara, or middle school, or need something SSA or SAB, that would be most likely to be at Santa Barbara, although Walton is doing more of that as well. You'll find Australians, you'll find Ken Stephen from Indonesia, you'll find all of these pieces. I have Polish composers that are writing. Yeah.
Can you search Jo-Michael Scheibe Choral Series on those websites, or do you have to search?
No, you should be able to do that.
Okay.
You go to, there might be on one, I don't remember, I think you can do that on Walton, that's easily done. And on Santa Barbara, you can go and just put in my name and it comes up.
I see. Okay,
yeah.
Great. So I think what I'll do then is I'll put in the show notes for this episode, I'll at least find those two links.
Yeah.
because I bet you if once you search your name, it'll change the link at the top, and I'll just drop some
Absolutely.
A place to start for people. So that'd be good.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it. Beautiful day here in Missouri.
All right. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code, and of course now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.